7.3 notes continued. We are starting on number 6 this time. So on this one, very similar to number 5, except for number 5, we were only squaring a double angle equation. This time it is being raised to the 4th power. So that's going to be a little bit different. Also, I want you to notice that in the answer that it gives over here, there are no exponents on any of this. So on number 5, when we did that one, we took a squared function and we turned it into a function with no exponents. With this one, when we're starting with a 4th degree function, we're going to have to use the half-angle formulas twice to get rid of all of those exponents. So once we get through this equation one time, it won't be enough because we're going to have a squared function in here. So I will show you what to do from there. All right, first of all, let's look at this. We've got the sine of 2x, except it wants us to use a half-angle formula. So to use a half-angle formula, we need to write this angle in terms of a half. So let's rewrite that as sine of 4x over 2. And then that's all to the 4th power. So what this tells us, and if you look at your angles sheet then, what does theta equal? In this case, our theta, or A, is what your formula sheet is. But that is going to, oh no, it's theta on half angle. Yeah. So theta is equal to 4x in this case. So if we have sine of 4x over 2, all to the 4th power, and then we need to rewrite that using our half angle formulas, go down to sine, and we're going to have plus or minus the square root. And that's supposed to be, oh stop. I'll try that square root again. Square root of 1 minus cosine theta, and instead of theta though, we'll have something else to write. So 1 minus cosine, and the angle we're working with is 4x. So cosine of 4x all over 2. And then let's raise that to the 4th power. Since this one over here is raised to the 4th power, then we also have to raise this to the 4th power. So that's going to partially cancel out our, well, it's going to completely cancel out the square root, and then we'll still have a square out in front. So we'll end up with 1 minus cosine of 4x over 2. The square root canceled, but we still have a square left over. So I'm going to rewrite that as 1/2 minus 1/2 cosine of 4x, and then all squared. And then when I square this, I'm going to use my squaring a binomial formula here, where we would have a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here so that I don't have to combine like terms in the end. So we're going to have 1/2 squared, which is 1/4, minus 2 times a times b, so 2 times 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4, and then cosine of 4x, and then plus the last term squared, which is going to be 1/4 it's kind of starting to work again. Okay, 1/4 cosine of 4x squared. That is a 1/4 here. Alright. So let's rewrite that a little bit nicer. So we have 1/4 minus 2 times 1/4, which is 1/2 cosine of 4x plus 1/4, oops, 1/4 cosine of 4x squared. So this doesn't quite fit into the boxes or the blanks that they've given us up above because they want us to have this all written with no exponents. So what we're going to do is we're going to take just the squared part, just that right there, and I'm going to rewrite that and use that half angle identity again to reduce the powers. So this is called a reduction of powers. So cosine of 4x, and then that whole thing squared. Now if we want to use that half angle identity, we need to rewrite that so that it's written as a half angle. So to write that as a half angle, we would have to use 8x over 2. That's the same as 4x. And then all of that squared, and then I'll do it in different colors so we don't lose it. That tells us that theta is going to equal 8x. So we got to remember that when we're going through our formula. And then on the right hand side, using your half angle formula, we are going to have 1 for cosine of plus or minus 1 plus cosine of 8x this time, all over 2, and then all of that squared. And remember, we're squaring it because this left-hand side was squared. Okay, and then that square gets rid of the square root. So now we are why? Okay, I think I figured out the problem. This little pen that I have to write on my tablet has a battery in it too. And so I changed that battery, hoping that this works better now. It's looking much better. Okay, so I am going to rewrite that. My square root and my square cancel out, and then I'm going to write it as separate fractions also. So I'll have 1/2 plus 1/2 cosine of 8x. All right, very good. And so now I can take all of that and plug it back in. Let's see, red. So I'm going to take all of this and put it into the answer that I had before and do a substitution right in here because we changed that cosine of 4x all squared. So now I've got to take that answer right here. This is where I'm coming from. So I'm going to take that answer that I had and rewrite it. So now I have 1/4 minus 1/2 cosine of 4x. All of that was really good. Then I had plus 1/4, and I did not want that exponent here. So I rewrote that equation, did a power reduction, and got 1/2 plus 1/2 cosine of 8x. And now, finally, well, this isn't quite final yet. I'm still going to have some work to do. But 1/4 minus 1/2 cosine of 4x plus, now I've got to distribute this 1/4 through. So I've got plus 1/8 plus 1/8 cosine of 8x. Now combining like terms, I have a plus 1/8 and a 1/4. So I'm going to rewrite that 1/4 to be a 2/8. Let's rewrite that. So I've got 2/8 here. I've got 1/8 here. So combining those together, I'm going to have a 3/8. So here we go, final answer. 3/8 equals, no, 3/8 minus 1/2 cosine of 4x plus 1/8 cosine of 8x. And now we go back up, fill in all of our blanks. So my first blank is at 3/8. I got the minus 1/2 cosine, that all looks great. And then cosine of 4x. And then plus 1/8 cosine of 8x. And that's all that you'll need to fill out for your answer on that one.